Hi, this is Kogito, and I'm back with another Through the Ages video. So in this video, we're finally in round 4 of the World Championships in 2025, and you might notice one big name in my group, but I'll talk about all my opponents in this group in turn before getting into our first 4-player game. So first of all, my first opponent is Gandon. Gandon's Glico rating is 37th. They were seeded into round 3 in this year, and we can see to get into the upper division, they won with 26 points. So somewhat of a close victory against Jezza, but, you know, still upper 20s is good. Last year, Gandon got seeded into round 3 because they got into stage 5 last year, so one stage after this one, where they finished just second behind a very good player, Sylvain. So Gandon, we can tell both from their results and from their Glico rating, is a very strong player. My next opponent is Fianteric. Fianteric was also seeded into round 3. We can see Fianteric finished with 28 points, so slightly better than Gandon, but I think not significantly so, still upper 20s. They got seeded directly into round 3 because last year in the World Championships they made it to stage 6 actually, so one stage ahead of Gandon, where they actually played against Weidenbaum notably and finished unfortunately 4th in that group. Still though, making it all the way to stage 6, definitely impressive. Their Glico rating is a bit behind Gandon's by 30 points, but their results may be a bit better. So hard to say which one between Gandon and Fianteric is stronger. I'd say they're both obviously very good players, and they're also both ahead of me, but maybe not by that much, although, you know, I got a higher rank in the most recent Glico update. But we can see, obviously I am, if anything, the underdog among all 4 players in this group if we just go by Glico. And of course the last player in my group probably needs no introduction, but just in case, Weidenbaum, unquestionably one of the best through the ages players in the world. He won the World Championships 2 years ago. Last year he got 3rd behind Martin Pecheur in PV4, was seeded directly into this round this year, so even though all of my opponents I think are very strong, Weidenbaum is certainly the favorite. But, you know, everyone, we can see, everyone, even me, is within the top 100 in Glico. Gandon's within the top 50. I mean, I think everyone, you know, is a strong player, and if I want to finish first, I'll need to play better than I ever have before, and even if I don't want to finish last, I probably have to play better than I ever have before. You know, and as you know, in a sense, only the player who finishes first goes on to the upper bracket. 2nd, 3rd, and 4th in the group will move on to the lower. But depending on how well you do, you'll get seeded against, I think, basically the better you do in this round, even if you go to the lower bracket, you'll play against people who did worse in this round and went to the lower bracket, if that makes sense. So, every game matters, every placement matters. This is going to be the hardest challenge I faced in my Through the Ages tournament career thus far. Excited to get into it, and without further ado, we'll take a look at the first 4-player game that finished in this group. By the way, in case you didn't know, Weidenbaum has already posted a video on his channel covering this game from his perspective, so just in case you haven't seen that, I definitely highly encourage you to check that out. Perhaps after watching my video, I will link that in the description. In any event, I'm playing 3rd. We'll take a quick look at the leaders and wonders. In Age 3, we can see there's a lot of lab leaders, Sid Meier, Steve Jobs, Einstein, and Marie Curie, along with a spaceflight. With no, there aren't many science leaders in Age 2 except for Darwin. This perhaps suggests alchemy, planning to upgrade into computers, is better than it might normally be. There's also Fleming plus Hollywood for a little bit of theater synergy that also aligns with Bach and Shakespeare in Age 2. There's also Mandela and Churchill, as well as and Manhattan Project with no Gandhi, so wars could also definitely be a strong possibility, as they always are in 4-player games. In Age 2, the important one, we have Railroad, Harvard College, and Suez Canal as power wonders. There's Maria without Ocean Liner Service, notably. Harvard College also pairs with a science synergy in the game. Suez Canal pairs with a possible Colossus. We'll talk about that in a bit. There's also Isabella and Barbarossa as colonization synergy leaders in Age 1. No James Cook, though. There's 1 military action leader in Age 1, Jean of Arc, as 2 in Age 2. The Age 1 wonders, there's some strong ones, especially Universalis and Silk Road, especially to get them first, potentially, as well as Great Wall. Machu Picchu is situationally strong. St. Peter's Basilica could potentially pair with a theater synergy. Gandon going first chooses the Colossus over, say, the Engineering Genius, which is definitely a notable play. Engineering Genius is certainly one of the strongest cards you can get on turn 1. That being said, there is a fair amount of Colossus synergy in the game, as there's the Suez Canal, there's also some good military leaders, and also Gandon is playing first, which is a position where you want to be when pushing military, because your opponents have less time to react to your strength pushes, so I think this is a defensible pick for sure. It does, however, leave Fiantric able to take a Wonder with Engineering Genius. He chooses the Colosseum over the Hanging Gardens. I actually think Hanging Gardens is a little maybe underrated. It is vulnerable to our Ravages of Time, but I think if the Ravages doesn't come out, or even if it does, if you can make use of the Hanging Gardens, it lets you avoid any Happy Face solution buildings in Age 1, which is nice because those solutions are kind of inefficient. So I think Hanging Gardens will also be good, but Colosseum is also good, especially in a 4-player game, I think, with more limited opportunities to get that third military action. There's only one military action leader in Age 1, so I think that's also a defensible pick. It also gives one Happy Face. As for me, I think the main thing I had to choose between to take on my turn was either Confucius as the most powerful leader in the game, or Library of Alexandria plus Frugality. And it's been a long time thinking on this choice. I think they're both pretty close. Well, I think probably Confucius and Library in and of themselves are at close to equivalent power level, so normally I think that taking the Library with the yellow card would be a bit better. There were a few reasons I took Confucius instead, though. I think the major reason was I was a little concerned about what leader I might get. I thought that Weidenbaum would... If I took Library, Weidenbaum would almost certainly take Confucius. Gandon and Fiantric also have not taken a leader yet, which means they would get first pick on the leaders in the row. One of them, Gandon, likely might take Homer in that situation. Fiantric might take Ashoka, for instance. Then I would be left with a choice of not many leaders. Moses would actually be discredited by then. So if none of my opponents take Moses, and they all take these 3 leaders, I would be dependent on a leader coming out of the deck, which are not the most exciting options. I mean, Hippocrates and Aristotle would be fine. Caesar might also be okay, although not great synergy with the Library. Aristotle does have good synergy with the Library, but he's not on the row yet. I would have to hope for him to come out, which is the major issue. I didn't really want to risk Aristotle coming out. Hippocrates could also be fine, but I think Hippocrates, you want to replace him with a leader early, and I mean, Isabella can be fine early, Nostradamus can be good early, but it's still... There aren't leaders like Saladin, for example, or Leonardo, who are really good when you get them early in Age 1. So I wasn't a huge fan of hoping for Hippocrates. In addition, if I didn't take a leader here, they would probably be available on the 2 civil action row. It just felt very uncertain. And in general, I prefer having a leader for certain than a wonder for certain, especially when that leader is Confucius, whose science, if I don't take the Library, I could very well not get an AJ wonder, but with Confucius's science, I can get text more easily to spend my resources on. There are also some strong Age 1 wonders to get first, as mentioned previously, especially Socrates and Universitas. Again, both be very strong when you get us to their first wonders, so... Overall, I felt more comfortable taking Confucius. The one last reason I had in mind, which I thought that Weidenbaum would almost certainly, I figured, take Homer plus Library, but I thought that maybe there's a small chance Weidenbaum would take Ashoka plus Frugality instead. I think Ashoka, with the yellow card playing 4th, can also be quite strong, and Gandon and Fiantric have already taken wonders. So I thought in maybe the small percentage chance Weidenbaum would pass up the Library, then I would get the Library after all with Confucius. I didn't expect that to happen, but that was... maybe a small possibility I was considering. So that was why I took Confucius here. Weidenbaum, though, as I expected, took Homer plus Library. Age 1 begins. Gandon takes 2 yellow cards, notably, and as we'll see, does not take a leader. It seems that Gandon preferred either Aristotle or Caesar over Ashoka or Moses. I think Moses plus Colossus is a pretty good combo, though, because the extra population you get with Moses, you can put into military and pressure your opponents even harder. So I think I probably would have taken Moses instead of... I would have taken Moses and elected him instead of taking these kind of below average AJ yellow cards. But I can also understand, especially Caesar may be a better combo with Colossus than Moses. So even though it's more civil action and efficient, it has perhaps a higher potential upside than taking Moses here. Fiantrix chooses to take Ashoka over Moses. Also defensible pick, even though as playing second, Ashoka is a little maybe harder to get going. Maybe I'm a little higher on Moses than average. It's not that I think Moses is a great leader. I just think some people seem to think he's like awful, whereas I think he's like fine. He's like not that bad. But Ashoka is also pretty good, just a little maybe hard to keep up sometimes. Can be tricky to play, especially when you're playing in an earlier position. But he can Ashoka also has a much higher upside than Moses, so I understand that. My turn I think is pretty straightforward. I could potentially take the Iron for 3 civil actions, maybe a Swordsman for 2, although I think that would be not good probably. Iron definitely always worth considering when it's this early. That being said, if I took Iron for 3, I would have to either delay upgrading Confucius or delay building a mine, meaning I'd lose either 1 science or 1 rock, and I figured that was not worth taking the Iron for 3 civil actions and delaying my civilization that much. Instead, I just took an urban growth. Another reason, if there were maybe bad yellow cards here, if maybe it was like only a stockpile and a cultural heritage or something, then I think that would be a stronger argument for taking the Iron. But in this case, I'm able to take a good AJ yellow card with this urban growth that I should be able to spend easily on the second lab. And so that was a decisive consideration for me to go with this line. I draw a Border Conflict and a Reign of Terror, and 2 scary cards to draw as Confucius, unfortunately, especially going up against Colossus, but that's how it goes sometimes. Weidenbaum, let's see. Right, decides to take Nostradamus, and then before building a mine and increasing his population. I think this is a good point. I'm not going to go over Weidenbaum's turns too much because he explains his logic in the video, but definitely as an early replacement for Homer, I think this Nostradamus pick makes a lot of sense. There's also, Homer is a leader that you don't need to elect immediately because obviously you don't need the happy face immediately, so. Ganon decides to take Aristotle instead of Caesar, but probably because after electing him, Ganon can take this Iron, and then next turn he will be able to play the Iron with the 4 science and then a 5th one, either from Aristotle taking a tech or from playing the cultural heritage. So I think that makes a lot of sense. Neither of my first 2 opponents siege. Fiantrix takes the Code of Laws and the Swordsman, getting a full Ashoka bonus. But Stephanos hand a little full with techs, but that's unavoidable with Ashoka. At least these are both good techs to have. And builds a second lab. Very important to do this, I think, when you have these techs in hand with Ashoka. You need as much science as you can get, so a sensible turn. As for me, I had to choose which of these 2 events to seed, the Border Conflict or the Reign of Terror, and I think it's kind of a tough decision, obviously, because, like I said, I'm going up against Colossus. Weidenbaum has Nostradamus, so there's a very good chance that I will be weakest. And so I basically, that doesn't stop me from seeding, because I think just as Confucius, like, you need a very good reason not to seed. And even though these events are risky for me, I think there's still a chance that I won't be hit by them. And I also know they're in the deck, so I can prepare for them. Anyway, basically the choice came down to, which would be worse for me to get hit by. I didn't necessarily expect to be strongest because I'm going up against Colossus plus an early Iron. I think Ganon probably has the best odds of being strongest out of all the players. And so, because of that, I wasn't really concerned about the upside of the Border Conflict. I was more concerned about the downside of which card would I least like to be hit by. And I decided the Border Conflict is less bad to be hit by than the Reign of Terror, because the Reign of Terror, getting hit by it is often equivalent to the Border Conflict, but instead of just losing the population and it goes here, you lose the population and it goes to your yellow bank. So for that reason, I think the Border Conflict is a bit of a less risky event to seed, even though it also has the potential to give one opponent an upside. So maybe in a 2 or 3 player game, the Reign of Terror would be more highly considered. That would be a less risky event, because it wouldn't give the strongest player the upside. But in a 4 player game, I figured giving one opponent 3 rocks is not as big a deal. Anyway, I revealed Development of Religion, which I was glad to see with having a free population. I also, I think, wasn't planning to build this lab anyway, as well, maybe, yeah, as we'll see in a bit. Also, Fantric at least won't be able to get this free religion, which is nice, though my other opponents will. At least Fantric has the happy face from the Colosseum, so not as big a deal. Anyway, I decided to go with the Silk Road here. I think you could defend not taking it here. My opponents probably won't be able to take it on their turn, so they'll probably be available on one civil action on my following turn, but I didn't really find much else I would rather do with my civil actions. I will take the knights later, so I'll talk about that in a bit, but the other cards available here aren't the most exciting, but in circuses, I already have my free religion, there's no Pierre in the game, so other than the knights, none of these cards were particularly appealing to me, and none of these cards I think were worth 3 civil actions. Maybe the monarchy, but I think probably not for 3 civil actions. I don't think any of my opponents necessarily might want the monarchy, maybe Gandon, but again, 3 civil actions would just be a huge cost. And so because I didn't really want to do anything else with my civil actions, I figured spending 2 on the Silk Road this turn made sense. I can also, I'll talk about the knights in a bit, I can also build the first stage of the Silk Road this turn. I chose to do that instead of increasing my population so that I don't go into consumption. The religion event is already out, so the only thing I might be missing out on is the development of warfare, which is not great to miss out on, but it's not the end of the world. And so I think getting the +1 food guaranteed was more important to me. I'm also, and I took the knights, I think I mentioned this in a previous video, but even though I don't have any tactics yet, you can use infantry tactics just with warriors, but you can't use cavalry tactics unless you get the knights. So when in doubt, the knights is a better card to get than the swordsman in my opinion. So that's why I went with knights, just as available now for 1 civil action. Again, not really anything else I would want to do. I mean, I could have, instead of taken the knights, increase my population, maybe build the lab and then take the knights, but I also didn't want to build the lab before building the first stage of the Silk Road, because this will increase the effect of my AJ urban growth. So that's another reason to take the Silk Road now, because by building the first stage here, when I do use the urban growth next turn, I'll get an extra 1 rock, which is probably more important to me than the extra 1 science from building the lab a turn earlier, because I have Confucius on the Silk Road. So those are the reasons why I played the turn this way. I draw an Aggression and a Dark Ages. I'll talk a bit more about the Dark Ages next turn. I think it's an interesting decision point for me in this game. Vitamin takes the religion, finally plays Homer, builds 1 stage of the library, increases population, and takes the stockpile. I was definitely surprised to see the stockpile when I played the game. Weidenbaum talks in a lot of detail about this somewhat surprising choice in his video, so I won't go into too much detail about it, but the basic logic from what he said is that it'll let him finish the Library of Alexandria next turn and also build a warrior to spend the Homer resource, which does make sense to me as logic, even though the stockpile is normally a pretty bad card to take, especially past the first turn. So I think it's an interesting play. I'm not necessarily sure I agree even after listening to Weidenbaum's logic, but the logic does make sense. Gandon Seeds reveals his development of politics. The cards that I draw are Crusades, a Trade Routes Agreement, and a bonus card. Gandon chooses to play the Culture Heritage in order to play the Iron, and is able to upgrade 2 times. Decides to play the Culture Heritage instead of taking the Theocracy of the Bread and Circuses, which makes sense. Neither of these are probably great cards that Gandon wants to have, so better to play the Culture Heritage that's already in his hand. So that Culture Heritage ends up being pretty good for Gandon. Fantric offers Weidenbaum the Open Borders Agreement. I was pretty sad to see this. I guess maybe didn't want to offer it to me because it makes sense not to offer it to Gandon because he's on Colossus. A little sad I didn't get to offer it. I mean, I am on Confucius, but Weidenbaum has Nostradamus, so but that's obviously Fantric, I'm sure, had his reasons for preferring Weidenbaum over me for the Pact. Anyway, he's able to finish the Colosseum this turn with the Engineering Genius and chooses to take a Cultural Heritage. Not the best request to take, but again, as Ashoka, he's going to probably want to keep text in his hand, so the Cultural Heritage will help him play out the text faster. So from that logic, it makes sense. Also, he has the Code of Laws, which will somewhat offset the civil action cost of the Cultural Heritage. Now it's my turn, and I had to choose which of these events to seed, and I think there are probably two major options. I think the Reign of Terror and the Crusades are both not preferred, because again, strength events are risky, so it probably, for me, came down to either the Aggression, just as a Confucius event, or the Dark Ages. And this is another thing that I spend a while thinking about. The Dark Ages is obviously also a risky seed, especially as with Confucius and Silk Road. I'll be having a lot of extra science, but can also look at it the other way around, in that I'll have so much science production, I'll be able to recover faster from the Dark Ages potentially than my opponents. Especially since I'll know the Dark Ages in the deck, I know that I need to spend science before it gets revealed. In addition, when I looked at my opponents, I felt that Gandon had really delayed his science. Fianteric hadn't, but has these texts in hand that I'll want to play as Ashoka. Vitamin has also been delaying his science. I mean, he'll get the library, but it'll still be a little bit shorter in science. Whereas I have Confucius and the Silk Road, and I'll be getting my second lab this turn. So I felt that I had slightly more science than my opponents did, especially Gandon, but also a little bit of Vitamin, and Fianteric maybe will have about it. And also Fianteric too, yeah, at least after I finish Silk Road. So I felt that the extra science from the Confucius event would probably help my opponents slightly more than it would help me. Whereas the Dark Ages, if I knew that I was in the deck, I would at least be able to play around it, and so it would potentially help me more than my opponents. Or hurt my opponents more than it would hurt me. And so even though it's risky, I decided to seed the Dark Ages for those reasons. Again, knowing it's in the deck, I should have an opportunity to spend my science before it gets revealed, hopefully. Anyway, reveals development of settlement, kind of punishing me a little bit for not increasing my population last turn, because it ended up canceling out the benefits of not going into consumption, because it saved me only 2 food instead of 3 food. Anyway, though, as I said previously, I'm able to use the urban growth with the Silk Road bonus to build my lab for only 1 rock. In order to get out of corruption, I also have to increase my population. So that leaves me with 2 civil actions left to choose what to do. And I think there are a couple options. One option for sure is to just build 2 stages of the Silk Road. I mean, I might want to perhaps wait for Masonry, but I think, you know, I don't know when Masonry will come out of the deck. One of my opponents perhaps could take Masonry. So I don't think that's a reason to delay the Silk Road, especially in a situation like this where I think that there's not that much I want to spend my civil actions on. I could maybe take one of these cards for 2 civil actions, like the Breakthrough, but Breakthrough for 2 civil actions isn't great. Could take a Theology, but I figured one will probably be available for me on my next turn. So I don't need to take it for 2 civil actions this turn. So for all those reasons, I figured that I would build at least 1 stage on the Silk Road. The question is, will I also build a 2nd stage, or will I take one of these 2 yellow cards? And I ended up deciding to build, I could also just take both of them, but I think that's probably a bit too civil action inefficient when I'm only on 4. I ended up kind of splitting the difference and took the Richland. I think this is partly a playstyle thing on my part. I feel generally a lot better having a rich land in my hand, just to offset the chance of if I don't get, if I'm the one without the iron, the rich land makes it a lot easier to go into coals in H2. It's also obviously better to have yellow cards in hand with Silk Road, and I thought that, you know, this is just a good opportunity to take a good yellow card for 1 civil action that I'll be able to use with the Silk Road. Even if I have irons, it'll give me an iron upgrade for free. That being said, it is obviously civil action inefficient. I mean, it's spending 1 civil action for 3 rocks, which is a great deal, but I also am only on 4 civil actions at the moment. I'm going to have to spend a lot of civil actions building Silk Road. So I think just building a 3rd stage of Silk Road would also be a very defensible choice here. I think it's kind of a personal preference thing. I mean, the rich land is probably going to sit in my hand for a while without being used, whereas building one stage of the Silk Road could potentially help me out earlier if I'm able to, say, finish the Silk Road next turn and then take an important card for 2 civil actions, or take 2 important cards or something like that, or take 1 card and do something important. So I think it's a pretty close decision between the 3rd stage and taking the rich land. Anyway, I end up keeping the Traders Agreement. As I said, I didn't really want to see the strength events, and so I figured Traders Agreement, I could potentially maybe keep it and offer it to an opponent, or maybe I'll see a good opportunity to use it. I'm a little I confess I still haven't fully figured out like the right situations to use the trade routes agreement. It's kind of a complicated pact. Anyway, I draw another aggression and tactic, which is nice to have. It's not a nice tactic, unfortunately. Vindemon finishes the library, takes a breakthrough for one civil action, and plays that stockpile to build the warrior. So don't really see much to say about this turn. Ganon Seeds reveals the development of planning. The options are agriculture, warfare, and crafts. Gandon takes the warfare to build the warrior free. I think that is probably the best one of these in a vacuum because it saves you the military action as well as the resources. Gandon increases his population with frugality, finally builds the second lab instead of the third mine. I think that makes sense. He's running pretty low on science, especially since he's taking the monarchy this turn, which will require a lot of science on his part, as well as the theology. Getting more science production with Aristotle is also important so you can play out cards quicker. Fiantric Seats reveals the development of civil life. Fiantric also takes warfare with development of planning, and with the development of civil life, plays the Code of Laws for one less science, increases population twice, takes an alchemy to have a building to upgrade, notably chooses the alchemy over the iron, which is perhaps a bit of a surprising decision. Perhaps Fiantric figured as Ashoka, he has a bit more rocks than normal, so the science is more important for him. Perhaps he is also thinking along the lines that I said earlier, where there's a railroad in the game, as well as age 3 leaders that want labs and no Newton. So perhaps going alchemy into computers is better than it normally is, and maybe it was more appealing to Fiantric than getting a... I mean, the iron wouldn't be too late if he started upgrading it. Although it would... he could do it... Yeah, he could upgrade irons next turn, potentially with the cultural heritage. So, irons would definitely also be quite good in this position, but I can also understand having these texts in his hand that he wants to get out earlier, valuing the science more. He also takes a drama, notably. There is some drama synergy in the game with Bak no Malena, who I think is the leader that wants dramas the most, but there is definitely a bit of theater synergy in the game, so I think that's an interesting choice, but he also has an extra happy face from the Colosseum, which makes it easier to live off dramas as your happy face solution. But as a third warrior, in addition, for 2 rocks, the event is about to flip, and Fiantric wants to be strongest, at least for a little bit. I seed, that was an aggression, I believe. Yeah, so, you know, all of my events were would be Confucius events as seeded, and so the aggression is the card that I thought would be least likely for me to ever use for its intended purpose. I reveal a development of science. So now we're in a situation, as I said, where I have 3 of these events. There's 1 Confucius event, 1 border conflict, and 1 Dark Ages. Now, I can prepare for the border conflict pretty easily. I am actually able to become strongest this turn thanks to the Legion I drew by just building a 3rd warrior and playing the Legion tactic. As for the Dark Ages, I also have a pretty good way to avoid that event, just kind of fell into my lap, so that was fortunate, where I have this monarchy available for 1 civil action. It's a little, you know, monarchy you can't really live off of for the whole game unless you get, for example, a Code of Laws. Without 1 Code of Laws has been taken. Maybe I'll be able to get the other one, though, especially since Fiantric took the first one, who plays before me, so I should have relatively good odds to get the 2nd Code of Laws. But like I said previously, because of the Dark Ages I seeded, that made the monarchy, I think, more important for me. It is the only card in the row that will let me... Well, I won't avoid the Dark Ages completely because I'll have 5 science after seeding, but it'll still obviously spend a lot more science than, for example, playing the Iron with this turn. And it's also nice to get the monarchy earlier for the extra military action. I'll be able to draw a card now, as well as the extra civil action, especially with Silk Road. So I think the monarchy is a good card for me, even aside from the Dark Ages, because I have Silk Road, you know, I have Confucius, so I have a lot of extra science to be able to afford it. But it's also the main reason I chose to play it was because of the Dark Ages I seeded. I am, however, happy to take the Iron for 1 civil action, to be able to start upgrading them, you know, maybe next turn if I don't seed and reveal Dark Ages, but at the very least the turn after that. Which the originally will also help me upgrade Irons earlier. I also think the Theology, I will need a Happy Face solution relatively soon when the age ends, so thought this is the last theology in the game after Gandon took the first one, so I thought it was pretty important for me to have. And with my last civil action, I just built one stage in the Silk Road. Even with 5 civil actions, I still need to be civil action conscious. I think the reserves is not worth the civil action that I spent on it, especially with my hand being as full as it is. I need to be careful not to clog my hand too much. I draw a Fighting Band tactic. Weidenbaum elects Nostradamus, sending Homer away to the library. Also builds a 3rd warrior and plays a Fighting Band tactic, so Weidenbaum now is 2nd strongest. And takes the last copy of Iron for 1 civil action in the breakthrough. Weidenbaum notably passes up the Universitas. Probably Weidenbaum doesn't felt that these cards were more important. It would be hard to take Universitas without Iron. But if he wanted to build this 3rd warrior, then he wouldn't be able to take Universitas plus Iron. So instead he passed up Universitas. At least it might be hard for an opponent to take Universitas. I mean, well, Gandon might, Fantrek might, so kind of a difficult pass, but I understand valuing these other things more. Gandon Seeds reveals new deposits. It helps me less than Gandon and Fantrek, but maybe it'll help me get my Iron upgrades in earlier, possibly. Gandon finishes Colossus and takes the Universitas. The surge from the new deposits will make it very easy for Gandon to build the Universitas. And he increases the population with his last civil action. Notably, chooses to do this instead of, for example, upgrading the 3rd mine, which I don't know if this registered to me at the time, but I think in retrospect is a very strong tell for Pestilence, because Gandon valued having an idle worker over upgrading the 3rd mine a turn earlier. So that's definitely... Well, okay, maybe not, because he also built a 3rd warrior in order to tie me in strength, so... never mind, maybe it's not a Pestilence tell. Maybe I spoiled the Pestilence a little bit. So yeah, Gandon... But Gandon valuing getting the strength, this took him from 4 to 5, so it didn't make him strongest after his turn. It didn't make him not weakest. But I guess it did make it harder for Fiantrek to catch up to him in strength, possibly. I probably would have upgraded the 3rd lab instead. On the other hand, doing it this way means that Gandon has exactly 9 rocks, which is enough to finish the Universitas next turn. So from that perspective, maybe... Although, I think he should have still... Yeah, he should have been able to do that. Yeah, if he upgraded the mine, because that would have cost 3 rocks, but give him 1 more. But if he upgraded the mine, then that means that by finishing the Universitas next turn, he would not be able to increase his military at all. So perhaps Gandon was worried that if he focused too much on his economy this turn and next turn, then he would be too vulnerable to strength events. Fantrek upgrades 2 alchemies, increases population, and takes Genghis Khan. Looks like Fantrek is concerned, maybe has a knight event in his hand. There are still 2 copies of knights in the deck, but you don't know when they'll be available. You don't know... Weidenbaum and Gandon both play before him, so Fantrek, of the 3 remaining players, is the least likely to copy of knights. So if he really wants to be able to use a knight's tactic, Genghis Khan makes sense. Perhaps none of the other leaders that could be available looked better to him either. Joan of Arc also looks pretty good though, although Fantrek doesn't need a military action from Joan of Arc, so... Anyway, not really much of a choice for me in this turn. The Fighting Band is more or less strict. I mean, it's not strictly worse than the Legion, but it's almost certainly going to be worse than the Legion, so I had no reason to keep it in my hand, so I sent it away. And I revealed the developed territory. I unfortunately was not able to bid on this territory because if I would not be able to replace this warrior because I only have 1 food. So losing this warrior would make me, I think, would make me way too vulnerable to strength events, especially the one that I know is in. I already know one is in the deck, the Border Conflict. So for that reason, I passed up, and Weidenbaum was able to win the territory for a relatively cheap cost. So a little bit unfortunate timing there, but it's unavoidable. I decided to upgrade 1 mine, but instead of upgrading another, I finished the Silk Road first. kind of a bit of a difficult decision, but I felt that at this point, yeah, I'm running a bit low on science now. I might want to get the knights relatively soon, especially if Dark Ages gets revealed. So if I finish Silk Road next turn, I'd have 5 science, plus... Well, I guess I'd have plus 2 from seeding, so I would have enough, but I still felt like I was running a little bit low on science, whereas with the rich land I was less worried about having enough rocks. So, for those reasons, I decided to prioritize the Silk Road over upgrading my iron mines. I also wanted to make sure I would free up my wonder slot. A Great Wall could be quite a good wonder for me, having already invested this much into infantry. As my last level action, I could upgrade a second mine with a rich land, but I decided the swordsman was more important. This is the last copy of swordsman. Like I said, I have 3 swordsmen already. The only tactics that have been played so far are infantry tactics, so I perhaps... knight tactic won't be I might not draw a knight tactic, it might not be played, or if it is played, it might be for a while. And anyway, basically it looks like I'll have to depend upon infantry for a while. And especially with Ganon having the Colossus, Weidenbaum having NESIBUDAMA, Fantarek having a lot of resources with the Shoka, I felt that and Genghis Khan, I thought that strength might be a little hard to... competing in strength might be a little hard in this game. And so I thought that the swordsman was too important of a technology to pass up to enable me to keep up with my opponents, even though it cost me an extra rock from delaying my mine upgrade. I do think that instead of completing the Silk Road, doing 2 mine upgrades would have also been a defensible play. Maybe a better one, especially knowing that Dark Ages is in the deck. Perhaps valuing the rocks over the science would have made sense, because if I didn't finish Silk Road, I would have 2 science next turn, plus 3 when seeding, and then I would have more, so... Oh, actually, there is a very good reason to finish the Silk Road this turn, which is if I didn't, then I would not have enough science next turn to play the Swordsman, and I wanted to at least have the option to play the Swordsman next turn. So yeah, I think finishing the Silk Road this turn is important because it lets me set up to play the Swordsman next turn. I draw 2 more tactics and another bonus card. So I drew a lot of events at the beginning and no events at the end of the age. Weidenbaum Seeds reveals the pestilence that was, like I said, I kinda spoiled. Looks like it was probably seeded by Fantarek. Weidenbaum loses the temple to it, his temple to it that he doesn't need for a while because of Homer. Weidenbaum upgrades some mines himself as well as increases population. They aren't the best cards in the row, so this turn makes sense. Ganon, as I said previously, is able to finish the Universalis this turn. I do think that is better than upgrading the 3rd mine. And unfortunately, he is able to take the Code of Laws. I think, yeah, it must have been on the Rowan Might turn, but only available for 3 civil actions, and I thought that the other things I was doing this turn, especially, you know, the Swordsman, the Silk Road, the Iron Upgrade, like, I felt those were all more important than taking a Code of Laws for 3 civil actions, which means that unfortunately Ganon is able to take it himself. Fantarek Seeds reveals one of my Confucius events. Builds a drama, so it's starting to get some culture production, and plays the culture heritage, so it looks like Fantarek is aiming to, well, he won't have the culture lead at least for a little while because the opponents all, I guess, seeded more and or had other, like, I think it's because he didn't have the temple and the opponents did, so he'll start catching up in culture now, and takes a rich land. Fantarek, I think, is the player without iron mines, yeah, so the rich land will obviously help out with its coal upgrades, and adopts a legion tactic to not be weakest. I seed one of my tactics. I guess it doesn't really matter which I seeded, but I decided to... Maybe I should have, on second thought, seeded the heavy cavalry tactic to make sure that, like, if the event deck gets reshuffled, Fantarek with Genghis Khan might have a chance to draw the heavy cavalry tactic. And so that would even though the chances of that are slim, maybe in order to avoid that happening, it would have been better to seed the heavy cavalry myself. Anyway, I reveal that Dark Ages that I seeded. It does hit me less than it hits my opponents, so I think this ended up being the correct choice for me to seed. It doesn't even mess up my turn in terms of playing the swordsman this turn. I do have to decide which leader to take at this point. The age will likely end before my next turn. So the two leaders on the row are Barbarossa and Eleanor. Barbarossa is available for one civil action less, and he is also generally a better leader. So I think that Barbarossa could definitely be defended as a leader in this situation. However, it didn't look great for me. I had already invested a fair amount into my military. I've already put units into my military, so Barbarossa will have less chances to activate throughout age 1. I will only have 2 foods, probably, so at least as things currently stand, I will only be able to use Barbarossa once. Maybe I could use Barbarossa once and hope to get a good age 2 leader early, but that's a bit risky. I mean, Napoleon, Catherine are both good leaders to get early. Darwin, Shakespeare, Bach, I'm not really set up for. Gandhi, maybe could help me get a cheaper scientific method, for example. So that is possible, but I felt that if I took Barbarossa, there's a good chance I would just be stuck a few turns with him as my leader, doing nothing for me. I could potentially take Barbarossa along with irrigation, but I kind of didn't want to build irrigations at the beginning of age 2 just to help out Barbarossa. There isn't a ocean liner service in this game, so irrigations are much harder to live off of as a permanent food solution, especially if you're getting them so late. If you get them towards the beginning of age 1, they can work, but if you're getting them beginning of age 2, they feel pretty bad. Yeah, so I felt that Barbarossa would just be a little too difficult to get a lot of value out of. Eleanor was also a good transition leader, but I felt that she would produce more guaranteed value with the extra card draws, and a little bit of extra science. So even though she costs 1 civil action more, and I think she is normally a worse leader than Barbarossa, I felt that in my situation, Barbarossa just wouldn't provide me with enough value. Now that being said, in retrospect, perhaps I should have also considered the denial component, because Gandon potentially is set up for a good Barbarossa, and so perhaps denying Barbarossa from Gandon should have been a strong consideration. Denial less important in 4-player than in other player formats, but it's still something you have to keep in mind, especially a situation like this where Gandon would be able to use Barbarossa twice on his turn, and then maybe more if he takes irrigation or gets a selective breeding or something. If I had considered that, I might have still gone with Eleanor just because Barbarossa doesn't look that great for me, but I might be able to take Barbarossa and, you know, aim to figure out a way for him to provide value. So, I guess another reason to not take Barbarossa is I don't know of any colonies in the deck. I mean, maybe they were seeded with Gandon having Colossus, but I don't know that for sure. And so, Barbarossa, easier to get going if there are colonies, but I didn't know if there were. So, yeah, definitely it does end up being a consequential choice for me in this game, though. Anyway, I do Elector this turn, and I want to play the Swordsman. Unfortunately, the Pestilence ended up being a pretty bad event for me. I was not able to lose my Temple. I think, Gandon, what did Gandon lose? Gandon disbanded the Warrior. I felt unable to do that. Gandon was able to do that because he has Colossus. If I lost a Warrior, I would lose my Tactic, and that felt unacceptable to me. And so out of all my options, I decided losing the mine was best, because the rich land should hopefully enable me to build a 3rd mine directly easier. So losing the mine will cost me at least 3 resources, but at least it won't cost me a civil action. And that felt like a better deal than losing any of my other populations. But yeah, definitely a really rough event for me. With my last civil action, I take the urban growth. This will help me potentially with lab upgrades, was mostly what I was looking at. I could have taken the alchemy instead, potentially, but I felt this late in age 1, and I didn't, and I was gonna have to prioritize my mine first, and so then it would probably be maybe into age 2, like 1 or 2 turns into age 2 before I could upgrade alchemies. That just felt kind of bad for me. I have the Silk Road to sort of my science a little bit, so I felt that I didn't need the science immediately, and so it seemed better for me to just wait for a scientific method to get science instead of, like I said, because my resources were probably going to have to go into my mine, into my military over the next few turns, and it would just take way too long for me to get the alchemies going. I upgrade. I also had to choose how many warriors to upgrade, whether I wanted to go to 7 or 8 strength. I think that one reason to go up to 8 strength, you could spend the military actions in age 1, so not cost myself any age 2 draws. It would also obviously give me just 1 more extra point of strength, but I felt that with Eleanor, I would really want to be able to draw an event to seed, which I don't currently have in my hand. And so I didn't want to, I wanted to at least give myself the chance to draw an event that I could seed with Eleanor. So I didn't want to upgrade all of my swordsmen. I could maybe upgrade only one of my warriors to swordsmen, but that would put me at 6 strength, which maybe would be easier for my opponents to match. Fantric could, well, Fantric probably isn't going to be able to build a 4th warrior because this is going to be unhappy when the age ends. Gandon could get up to 5 strength and then 7 from copying the Legion tactic. So that's probably the most notable thing. Gandon could very easily go up to 7 strength on his turn, which means that by going up to 7, I will be strongest on my turn potentially. On the other hand, Gandon will probably go for Barbarossa instead, which could get him 2 warriors. But then if he did that, he would not be able to copy a tactic. Unfortunately, I don't draw an event to seed. Vitamin Seeds reveals the Buddha conflict. This ended up being a good event for me to seed because I actually happened to be strongest what was revealed. So that ordering was definitely fortunate for me. Vitamin takes an irrigation, decides to upgrade an irrigation, and mine does this over the alchemy. He explains in his video that's because if he wasn't able to upgrade both an alchemy and an iron, but he is able to upgrade a farm and an iron. So even though these are late irrigation upgrades, perhaps with the developed territory giving him a little bit of extra yellow bank, and also not having to devote a population to a happy face solution, at least for a little while, living off of irrigations would be a bit easier than it normally would. So Weidenbaum chooses the late irrigations, even though I said earlier that I don't like late irrigations, and that was the reason why I didn't take Barbarossa. Perhaps I undervalue the late irrigations too much, and late irrigation with Barbarossa would still be good. Ganon takes a Knights, and the alchemy that Vitamin I didn't take, and he does indeed take Barbarossa. Barbarossa lets him get 2 Knights, and he has a medieval army tactic, so unexpectedly Ganon pushes strength a whole lot, and now I have to definitely worry about my own strength situation, and at least I'm not vulnerable to an aggression because of my bonus cards, though that means it might be harder for me to bid on a colony. Age 2 begins. Notably, Fantric chose to keep Ashoka instead of replacing him last turn, so because of that, Fantric loses a civil action. Elects Genghis Khan, plays the Swordsman, upgrades 3 times, and plays a medieval army tactic. This gets him up to 11 strength, which is 2nd strongest. He also takes a reserves, an urban growth, and bread and circuses. The bread and circuses will certainly help supplement the dramas as a happy face solution. Still not the best use of civil actions, but he doesn't really have anything else to do. Maybe take the irrigation. Maybe the Great Wall could also be considered with Fantric being so heavily in warriors, but on the other hand, Fantric is also only in bronze mine, so it would probably be difficult for Fantric to actually complete the Great Wall. I was, however, happy Fantric didn't take the Great Wall because I felt it would be a very strong wonder for me. Not only does it help support my strength, which I'm currently kind of struggling with, at least compared to Ganon and Fantric, but the happy face will also be variable. It means that I will be able to delay getting this theology and spend my science and civil actions and resources on other more variable things. I didn't see any reason anything else good to do at this turn other than just take the Great Wall and build 2 stages. Especially without taking Barbarossa, I think an irrigation this late is not good. I don't think I have the science to justify cartography, especially without knowing if there's colonies in the deck. I don't think any of these cards... I mean, I could take the Engineering Genius potentially for 2 civil actions to make the Great Wall easier to complete, but I think... yeah, I'll have enough rocks to complete the Great Wall next turn anyway without the Engineering Genius, and so I thought that being more civil action efficient was better. And I upgraded my last warrior just because it was something that I didn't necessarily need it. I think I might have needed it to avoid a double aggression for my opponents. Because if I was at 7, I was at 7 and Ganon aggressed, I would lose both of my bonus cards to defend, and then Fiandra could aggress, and I would not be able to defend unless I drew a bonus card. But by upgrading this Swordsman, I will be able to defend against Ganon with only 1 bonus card, and against Fiandra without any bonus cards. And so that will make a double aggression from them impossible. So that's why this was an important upgrade. I discard my aggression, and I draw a popularization of science in an independence declaration. Vitamin Seeds reveals an immigration. Looks like Fantric likely seeded that. Vitamin has just enough science to play the Republic that appeared this turn, so that gives him a big boost, and he also chooses to take the Transcontinental Railroad. Like me, Vitamin is also being pressured by our opponents, and so like me, he is taking a Wonder to help his strength. Probably a bit of a, it'll give him a bit more strength than the Great Wall will give me, but obviously the Transcontinental Railroad was available for too many civil actions on my turn, I think, for me to take. Kindon Seeds reveals a wealthy territory. I was willing to bid on this one. I have the ability, I believe, to replace the warrior now. Yeah, I do, because I have a free population. I wasn't willing to bid more than my swordsmen and my 2 bonus cards, though. Bidding 2 swordsmen doesn't make sense for me. That would be getting rid of 6 rocks worth of units to get 6 rocks, so I think that's not worth it. So unfortunately, that means Ganon is able to win this wealthy territory for just a knight and a bonus card, thanks to his colonization bonus. Ganon builds a theology to get out of rebellion and spends 3 civil actions on a selective breeding. That's a high cost, but I think with Barbarossa, this early selective breeding is going to be extremely valuable for him, so I think that is definitely a justifiable decision. And builds a knight directly to remain strongest. Fantric Seats reveals Invaders. This, unfortunately, ends up being a pretty bad event for me, because it'll force me to lose 2 rocks, which means that, previously on my turn, I had set things up so that I would be able to finish the Great Wall, and then with my 2 remaining rocks, plus my Rich Land with the Silk Road bonus, I would have just enough rocks to finish the Great Wall and build an iron directly. Because of this Raiders, I no longer have enough rocks to do that. So this Raiders actually ends up costing me 4 rocks, which is obviously really bad. Fanturic takes the Statue of Liberty in order to help out his Yellow Bank situation. Builds a second theater to... perhaps this is a rebellion tell, or maybe he was afraid of rebellion himself, or maybe he just wanted a bit of extra culture. And takes an Engineering Genius to help with the statue. Passes up on Knights, but I mean, he is on Genghis Khan, so he probably is waiting for Cavalryman anyway. On my turn, so I seeded, I forget which card that was now. I guess I was a little afraid of seeding, and I wanted to seed with, we'll talk about this in a bit. I wanted to seed with Eleanor. I am not the weakest, so the only really bad event, I think, for me would be this one that happened to get revealed. So I didn't want to see the Independence Declaration, I think, because even though I don't have any colonies, Weidenbaum, it would be hurt a little much, but also Weidenbaum has Nostradamus and the railroad, so I figured probably Weidenbaum wouldn't be hit by the Independence Declaration. Ganon probably won't be hit by the Independence Declaration. It wouldn't be too bad for him, even if he would be. So I thought that the Independence Declaration was a bit of a low value card, whereas the one I seeded, which again I forget now, unfortunately, I felt would be more likely to give me value. Unfortunately, the event, the rebellion that was revealed right after the raiders, that's sort of a 1-2 really bad for me punch, because obviously it costs me, it is revealed right before I am able to get rid of my unhappy worker. So those two events having unfortunate timing for me in this game. At least I am still able to finish the Great Wall this turn, which helps out with my strength situation. And with my last civil action, I take the reserves over the urban growth, mainly because with the Silk Road, if I play the reserves for food, I will be able to increase my population next turn, or, you know, whenever I choose to play the reserves. I end up keeping the immigration. Now at this point, thanks to the Great Wall, at least it seems likely that I won't be hit by the immigration. And I draw a Napoleonic army. Nice to have an Age 2 tactic, and one that I should be able to use. I already have the Knights in my hand, so I just need one copy of cannons, as well as an arms industry and an aggression. Vandamam Seeds reveals one of my Confucius events. Finishes the railroad, so he is now safe from aggressions as well, although he is still going to be the weakest after his turn. Takes a Rifleman, important card for him, as well as an urban growth to help with potential scientific methods. Ganon Seeds reveals another of my Confucius events. Definitely would have preferred them to be revealed instead of the Raiders Rebellion double whammy. Ganon play selective breeding, is able to upgrade 2 times, so I have a lot of food for Barbarossa now. So Barbarossa looks like we'll be able to last Ganon well into Age 2 at this rate, and takes the second copy of Rifleman. At least Fandrick and I both have Swordsman, so it's not the end of the world for either of us. Fandrick uses the engineering chance to build the first stage of the Statue of Liberty, has enough science to play the Constitutional Monarchy to give himself a big civil military action boost, and takes a copy of cannons and takes that coal. He will not be able to play the coal next turn, at least at the current rate. Maybe there's an event that could potentially help him out, but right now he can't play it next turn, but it is still an important card for him to have, and it's also, I understand, valuing the Constitutional Monarchy, getting those extra civil actions, definitely also very important. So I think this is a good turn from Fandrick. And upgrades his last warrior with a free military action. I see that immigration, reveal the card of arms. This also hits me, unfortunately. So I think we'll see how much of it, but we'll see at this turn. I'll at least be able to somewhat compensate for that civil action loss, because I will actually be replacing Eleanor this turn. I at least am able to finally, after how many turns was it since that Pestilence hit? The Pestilence hit on turn 7, so it's been 1, 2, 3 turns. So that Pestilence ended up costing me 3 rocks, unfortunately. So Pestilence cost me 3 rocks. Raiders cost me effectively 4 rocks. Event Deck has not been kind to me in this game, sadly. Well, at least I got a little bit. I mean, I got plus 3 rocks from the Border Conflict earlier, at least, but that's still a net negative of 3 rocks for me from the events. I decided to take Maria Theresa. There are a couple of reasons for this. First of all, like I said, the extra civil actions Eleanor will give me from replacing her will let me do more important things this turn. I'll end up actually, I think, using those civil actions on very important cards. I also think Maria should be a good leader for me. Even though it's a 4-player game, next turn I'll elect her this turn. Next turn, not only will I be able to get her military resource bonus, I will also be able to increase my population thanks to the reserves. In addition, after electing her, I am going to take the selective breeding. So the selective breeding should give me enough food income that I should be able to increase my population multiple times with Maria. The extra rocks you're giving from my military will also compensate for how long I had to wait to get my 3rd mine and how much rocks I lost there. I think in general she's one of the better leaders. I mean, you know, we discussed before, Napoleon would be good for me. Catherine would be fine. I'm not really set up for Darwin or Bach or Shakespeare. Gotti would be fine. But I think that Maria at least should be second best, perhaps behind Napoleon. Arguably as good as Napoleon, though, because especially if my opponents keep increasing strength, Maria should give me a lot of value with her military resources. Will make it a lot easier for me to transition into the Napoleonic army tactic. So I do think Maria should be a strong leader for me in this game. I decided to take the efficient upgrade to make updating these farms quicker, as I had to play the farm preemptively instead of taking one of these cards. I think that the Engineering Genius, I wasn't sure if I would get an H2 Wonder. I mean, the Suez, I don't have any colonies, and I don't have a colony in my hand. The Harvard College, maybe, but I thought that there was a pretty good chance that Gannon, for example, might take it, or even Weidenbaum potentially. And I also wasn't sure, I mean, I'm kind of short on civil actions a little bit, so I'm not sure if I'll have the leeway to take the Harvard College. So I wasn't sure if the Engineering Genius would actually be useful for me. The Revolution idea also worth considering, but I do have a fair amount of science saved up. I'm not going to need an H2 government form. And Revolutionary Idea 2, not the best card. Maybe I should have taken it instead of preemptively playing this. But again, because I'm on relatively short civil actions, I was a little bit worried about staying civil action conscious, especially since next turn I will be spending 2 civil actions. Okay, I did have a particular plan for next turn, which is why I did this, which is play the resource for food, increase in population, play the knights, build a knight with the Maria Benes. That's 3 civil actions, play reserves, increase population, play knights, which leaves me with 2 civil actions left to upgrade both of my farms, which I will have enough rocks to do again because of the Maria resources and the efficient upgrades. So playing, I have to play the selective breeding preemptively in order to have enough civil actions to do everything that I want to do next turn. I could have played the knights preemptively instead of, but I figured that chances were somewhat higher that I would yeah, I thought at the time that I was more likely to want to upgrade farms and not build the knight than build the knight and not upgrade farms. In retrospect, I think that's not true. I think using the Maria resources is too important. So I actually think in retrospect I should have played the knights preemptively, because I will almost certainly be building a knight next turn, whereas there's maybe a possibility I won't be upgrading farms next turn, and I might want to use that extra civil action for other purposes. So that was a mistake, I think. I don't play the economic progress. I thought that Gandon has more blue. Gandon has more blue cubes than I do. Fantrick is going to have coals. I just was not convinced it would be a good event for me. Actually, yeah, I just got everything I need to keep my tactic, and I wanted to keep my bonus cards both for defense and for potentially being on a colony. So I ditched all my other cards. I don't need events anymore either because I don't have Eleanor. I drew a Cold War and a Terrorism. Terrorism probably not suitable. I actually have the Culture Lead at the moment. Cold War potentially suitable though with my Napoleonic army tactic. Weidenbaum Seeds reveals a vast territory, which was in the deck. This will help out Gannon a lot. This is a very good territory to win with Barbarossa, obviously. Gannon is willing to put a lot into it, but I think that's justifiable. I bid 7, which was which was my swordsman plus my 2 bonus cards. I wouldn't be able to replace more than 1 swordsman, so I wasn't willing to put 2 into it. That would make me too weak. Weidenbaum chooses to take the Suez Canal. He already has 1 colony, presumably has another in his hand, so it should at least be a pretty good Suez Canal. He also mentions that it was a denial towards Gannon, who already has 2 colonies. And Weidenbaum upgrades his last farm. Gannon uses Barbarossa's ability to rebuild an army, the army that he bid on the vast territory, increases population, plays an alchemy, and is able to build one directly. Has just enough rocks to do this, so this is definitely a strong turn from Gannon. Uses his last 2 civil actions on a revolutionary idea and a wave of nationalism. Well, the revolutionary idea 2 isn't the best, but it's pretty good. Wave of nationalism, very strong card, so very strong turn from Gannon, really making use of Barbarossa. Barbarossa providing him with a lot of value. Fantric Seeds reveals a scientific breakthrough. Perhaps Fantric seeded this himself because this enables him to build the coal this turn by playing reserves. And the Rich Land takes a breakthrough for 3 civil actions. That's a lot, but Fantric is having some trouble with science, and perhaps he doesn't like any of the other cards in the row anyway. Doesn't have enough resources to do anything else with the civil actions. Then take that plus a frugality. As for me, I did see the Cold War again, thanks to my extra Maria resources and the Napoleonic army tactic. I will take the cannons this turn. I felt that there were at least pretty good odds that I would be able to be a party to the Cold War. And, you know, seeding generally good, you know, especially when I'm not weakest. I'm not weakest on my turn. Yeah, I'm not weakest, so. I reveal a cultural influence, which gives me as much culture as Fantric, a bit more than the opponents. I do what I said previously of building but instead of building a knight, I decided to take a cannon and build that instead. I thought that the cannon was too important to pass up. We can see that the remaining 2 cannons are in the row. I was afraid that if I didn't take this, Vindemon would take one and Ganon would take the other. I need the cannon for my Napoleonic army tactic, so I was not willing to pass it up. And unfortunately, that means I will be delaying my farm upgrades. At least it ended up playing the farm preemptively ended up not mattering because I decided to build a cannon instead of a knights anyway. So yeah, I think it's just, while delaying my food obviously is not something that I want to do, I felt that using the Maria resources was too important, especially since it makes me strongest on this turn. I again keep the bonus cards for potential colony bids. Maybe I should have ditched this bonus card because the age is about to end. I draw an Annex and a Ravages of Time. I am not going to see the Ravages of Time because I would have to lose either my Silk Road or my Great Wall to it, but I am glad to know that it won't be in the deck at least. Vindemon Seeds reveals the popularization of science. It helps Ganon and Fantric a little bit more than me and Vindemon. Vindemon is able to take the strategy, which is a very important card for him, being on Republic. Also takes the last copy of Cannons. And places one, so perhaps he has a Cannons tactic in hand. Builds 2 cannons, and indeed he does. He has the Fortifications tactic. One of the strongest tactics. This enables Vindemon to be strongest. Ganon Seeds reveals the freedom of movement. I think this is the card I seeded earlier. Probably. Anyway, Ganon plays the Code of Laws and the Rifleman and the Wave of Nationalism to upgrade 1 Rifleman. No, uses Barbarossa to build a Rifleman and a Knights. So now he is... And Warriors, which makes him strongest. And takes a Patriotism and a Breakthrough. 2 pretty good yellow cards. Notably, Ganon used the freedom of movement to move a worker from Warriors to Iron to get increased resource production, which is an interesting choice, but it is true that thanks to Barbarossa and the selective breedings, Ganon has a lot of population, so he probably does have the population to spare to put 4 into mines. Still, probably not something I would have done. But I think it's a defensible choice. Fantric offers me the international trade agreement. I pretty much accepted this. It'll be very helpful for me. Fantric plays the cannon, takes a reserves and Bach for 3 civil actions, values Bach over Gandhi, even though he costs 2 civil actions more. Notably, I think Gandhi would also have been a pretty good leader for him, but Bach will provide more culture. That part is true. Plays Bach and adopts the Legion tactic because he lost Genghis Khan, and takes an organized religion to help with his happy face. Decides to take this instead of playing the bread and circuses, notably. I think maybe playing the bread and circuses should have been considered because I'm not sure if he'll necessarily need all of these happy faces, especially since he'll presumably want to build a 3rd theater at some point. But maybe he was also worried about his military and thinking that the organized religion would enable him to put all of this population into military. Like I said, I don't see the Ravages. Oh yeah, Fantric used the freedom of movement to get to upgrade to coal without spending a civil action. Similarly, I use freedom of movement to upgrade my farm without spending a civil action. I am able to get the full Maria resources again. In order to use it, though, I have to disband the swordsmen to put it into knights. So, sucks to disband the swordsmen. At least Maria is making it so that it's kind of a free swordsman I'm disbanding because I'm building the knights for free. Still, obviously, not what you want to do ideally. But I have to do it because I don't have a free population. This lets me get the Napoleonic army tactic. This ties me in strength with Gandon. I upgrade my second farm with the efficient upgrade. Now, I think all of that so far made sense. This, though, I think was a pretty big mistake, and I'll talk about it. And I'll talk about what. First, I'll talk about the logic behind it. I mean, obviously, I wanted more happy faces relatively soon, and so I think this is nice. Now, it's pretty late in Age 1. There is one copy of Organized Religion left. Fantric took the first one. Weidenbaum, now that being said, Weidenbaum might take it. Gandon probably wouldn't, since he already has theologies. And I do play before Weidenbaum, so, but Weidenbaum also has a lot more civil actions than I do. So from all those perspectives, the theology is at least safer, because I don't know if I'll necessarily get the Organized Religion. However, I think there's a big opportunity cost here, which is I took the Frugality, which is a very strong card with Maria and Silk Road. But I think there's an important card that I pass up here, which is this Justice System. I think at the time what I was thinking of is, well, I'll get the scientific methods and I'll aim to get an Age 3 government form, so I won't really need the Justice System. But that maybe was a bit of an ambitious plan. I mean, the scientific methods are gonna be quite late for me, and so I won't actually have that much science. And perhaps chances are high that I won't be able to save up enough science to get an Age 3 government form. And if I don't, the Justice System might be an incredibly important card for me, because it'll get me that 6 civil action. 6 is a lot better than 5, especially heading into Age 3. 5 can be really restrictive. So I think instead of playing the theology, if I had instead taken the Justice System, and, well, I don't really need the rich land, so it would probably, I could potentially, let's see, I have 3 civil actions after the Knights on the farm. At the very least, I should have, I think, taken the Justice System. Maybe not upgraded the theology this turn. I mean, I'm spending the civil actions, efficiently, but I don't need the theology this turn. So I could have potentially played the theology and not upgraded and taken the Justice System. I would have exactly enough science to play the Justice System next turn, although I probably would want to play the scientific method instead. But let's see, if I play the scientific method next turn, I'll go down to 1, and then I'll have 6 production, 7 production. So I would then have enough to play Justice System the following turn. So yeah, I think potentially, I think I should have definitely taken the Justice System, as well as the Frugality, probably, because it is a good card. Maybe instead of the Frugality, taking the Justice System plus the Scientific Method, just to be more civil action efficient. Maybe hoping that I'll get the Organized Religion. Or I could preemptively play the Theology just as a safety measure, but not upgrade it yet, and instead take the Justice System on the Frugality. I think both of those turns could have definitely been justifiable. I think that not taking the Justice System was a huge mistake, though. I just got the Ravages, like I said, even though I probably won't play the Annex. I mean, maybe if everything goes right, and I definitely am not going to want to see the Ravages. Weidenbaum Seeds reveals an inhabited territory. He's willing to bid a little bit on this, but I was afraid to bid too much and leave myself open to an aggression from Gandon. Weidenbaum is thus able to win it for 6. So in a way, the worst, it doesn't need any more. Plays the strategy, finishes the Suez Canal, and gets an inhabited territory too with it. So the Suez Canal is obviously giving Weidenbaum's position a big boost. Notably, Weidenbaum used freedom of movement to move work from iron to cannon. But it is true that thanks to both the railroad and the Suez Canal, these two wonders producing him rocks, he'll have 9 rock production even with only 2 mines, which should be more than enough. So I understand wanting to push military instead. Vitamin also takes Anthony Gunny, perhaps because Vitamin has so many yellow token colonies, and his yellow bank is looking so healthy, perhaps getting rid of a farm could have also I think I actually read the comments in my mom's video, and he mentioned that in retrospect, probably getting rid of the farm would have been better. But I think at the time it is true that maybe he will still need the farm as the yellow bank goes. I mean, if he gets rid of it here, then he'll stop getting food production after getting all these populations. So without knowing if he'll get any more yellow token colonies, for example, it does make sense that he'll need the second farm to keep going into his yellow bank. Weidenbaum chooses Antoni Gaudi as his leader. Napoleon, he didn't have enough civil actions to take as well, while also playing the strategy and finishing the Suez Canal. Builds a temple with the urban growth. This is kind of like a free drama because it gives him +1 from the temple and +1 from Gaudi. Gannon declares a war on territory of Fantric, at least it's not against me. Takes Napoleon, takes the cavalryman, upgrades 2 warriors to riflemen, takes a rich land for his last mine, as well as in navigation, perhaps indicating there are even more colonies in the deck, putting them up to 27 strength, which is definitely a lot, and it's going to be pressuring Fantric a lot. Age 3 begins. Fantric, unfortunately, is going to have to sacrifice a lot in order to defend against this war because it doesn't have any free population. The last selective breeding is really late, and so Fantric was not able to upgrade his farms throughout all of ages 1 and 2. So in order to defend, Fantric has to destroy both a mine and a farm. Takes a cavalryman, plays the reserves, is able to build a cavalryman, is able to build 2 cavalryman, and play a classic army tactic. And then discard a swordsman to be out of rebellion. The swordsman disband will not cost him an extra yellow token in the war. He will end up losing 2 yellow tokens to Gandon, which is definitely heavy cost, especially since he destroyed 2 of his buildings. So this ended up being quite a bad war for Fantric, unfortunately. I think not getting the selective breeding earlier really, really hurt Fantric's position. As for me, I have nothing to cede. I can use 3 Maria resources again in order to build a cannon. Unfortunately, I am now still in rebel. This is perhaps another thing I should have considered. Yeah, I think I didn't adequately consider this while the game was playing when I upgraded my theology, which is after the age ended, my next population would be unhappy, but I'd want to put it into the military to spend the Maria bonus, which means this theology by itself is actually not even helping me stay out of rebellion. I am able to get out of rebellion by taking that organized religion, which is indeed available for me after all. But as we can see, this means that building this theology ends up costing me 2 civil actions and 2 science for absolutely nothing. So that was definitely... And like I said, I did that while passing up the justice system. So that ended up being a really, really bad play for me. I do spend my last civil action on the scientific method. Even though it'll be an H3 when I upgraded them, I think better late than never when it comes to these things. I will not have enough science to play a computer's next turn, even if one is on the row. We can see that I will also be in corruption this turn. How many blue cubes does the justice system give? It gives 3. So, I mean, I wouldn't have had enough science to play the justice system anyway, though, I suppose, because even without paying the 2 from theology, I still would have only had 6. So, playing the justice system... so, the justice system wouldn't have helped me avoid corruption this turn. It's just, I had to do these other things, which meant that I don't have enough resources. So, it means that the Maria bonus ends up kind of being for 1 and not 3. I draw an armed intervention and an impact of wonders, which should be a suitable impact, at least. Mom builds a 4th cannon to become strongest. Takes play scientific method and upgrades 1 of them. Increases population. Takes an opera, which is good with Gaudi. Takes a team sports, which is good with Gaudi. and increases population a third time. Ganon gets 2 yellow tokens from Fantrick, increases population twice, builds a 4th rifleman, plays the navigation, takes a multimedia. There's, as we covered earlier, there's definitely a lot of good leaders for the multimedia, so it's a nice card to have for sure. And he should have enough rocks to support it as well, especially with the urban growth that he also takes. Fantrick finishes the library, takes the Modern Infantry and the Manhattan Project, so Fantrick is devoting his entire attention to protecting himself, which definitely makes a lot of sense. He's in a pretty vulnerable position right now. The Manhattan Project would have been nice to me, but I might not have had the civil actions to take it anyway. Definitely I wouldn't have had the civil actions to take it this turn. I don't Siege because I know that there's a Cold War in this deck, and I'll become, I think, second strongest in my turn. So I didn't want to Siege to give myself a chance to win that Cold War. As you can see, by building a Knights for free, I am able to tie Gandon in strength. I also have enough resources to upgrade 2 scientific methods, which also just takes me out of corruption, which is definitely nice. That gives me 1 civil action left. Without many great options for it, Endowment of the Arts, currently I would be playing it for 4 culture. Yeah. Sid Meier, I mean, maybe, but I mean, I only have scientific methods. I don't know if I'll be able to build a 3rd one anytime soon. It's kind of an unexciting H3 leader in general, absent specific circumstances. There is an internet on the row, but with only 5 civil actions, I might not have a chance to take the internet next turn anyway. Journalism, maybe, but again, my extra population is almost certainly going to go into my military regardless. So in the end, I decided to take communism. It's an H3 government form. With my 7 science production now, there is at least a possibility that I might be able to play it, maybe even do a revolution if that feels, if there aren't any more important things to do on my turn, but maybe with a revolutionary idea, although this revolutionary idea sadly I have to pass up on, but maybe I'll be able to get another revolutionary idea. Maybe I'll be able to win the Cold War. I thought there was a possibility I could play the communism, and then that would obviously give my civil action situation a big boost. I draw an aggression and an impact of balance. Weidenbaum builds another cannon to become strongest. Takes the revolutionary idea. Takes the spaceflight. Looks like the spaceflight will be a pretty good wonder for him. He'll have the scientific methods going. Gaudi will also discount his urban building technology, and he took a revolutionary idea. It's also probably just the strongest wonder in the deck. I mean, Hollywood, it'll be hard to get. Empire State Building, kind of hard to get a lot out of in a 4-player game. Sometimes you can, but Weidenbaum probably is in a position to right now. And internet is also not great for him. So, of the wonders left in the game, Spaceflight definitely, I think, by far the best one for Weidenbaum. So it makes sense to take it now. And with his last civil action, he increases his population. Ganon declares another war over territory onto Fantrick. Takes the rockets, destroys the mine, so maybe the freedom of movement into the mine ended up not being that great for Ganon. Anyway, though, he builds a rocket and takes a fundamentalism, putting him at 39 strength. Fantrick exceeds, and unfortunately the Cold War is revealed while I am the 3rd strongest, so I end up not, it ends up being good for my opponents and not me. So it ended up being a bad seed for me as things developed in the game. Fantrick takes computers, decides instead of defending himself to upgrade the computers instead and take Marie Curie. I think that, I kind of understand the logic here. Fantrick probably figures that his position is so vulnerable that the only chance he has, basically, is if Gandon in particular, and maybe Weidenbaum too, doesn't have any wars in their hand to really punish him. And so Fantrick probably figured instead of like wrecking his economy even more to defend, thus making it so that it would basically be impossible for him to win even peacefully, instead he should just eat the cost of the war and just hope that he can upgrade his economy and then hope that he'll not be hit with a war in the future, at least before he'll be able to build this Manhattan Project. The cost of doing it this way, though, means that he will be, even with the engineering genius, he will take this turn 1 rock short of finishing the Manhattan Project next turn. But again, I understand Fantrik's perspective of he's losing right now, so the only chance he has of winning is to take a risky play and hope it works out. I think that's I think that's probably an act. If that was his logic, I think that would be a pretty plausible reading of his situation. The wars are hurting him a lot. I see the impact of balance. It looked to be at least a neutral impact for me. I reveal vast territory. Unfortunately, I'm not able to put that much into it because, again, I think I was worried about aggressions from Gandon. So Weidenbaum ends up winning this one too for only 1 cannon and 4 bonus cards. This maybe is a bit of a questionable choice for me, though, where I take the movies. So let me explain my logic here. So let's take a look at my situation. I am ahead on culture of Weidenbaum and Gandon by a little bit. I'm behind Fantrik, but Fantrik is currently being hit pretty hard by wars. However, there's a question of how am I going to translate my position to a potential win in this game. Weidenbaum currently has the space flight. I am not in a position that internet would be bad for me. It doesn't look like I'll be able to make it be better. And so basically the question I was asking myself is how could I potentially beat Weidenbaum peacefully? And it looked like, and I think the movies is probably a necessary card for me if I have a hope of beating Weidenbaum. War with my limited military actions, with me not having an air forces yet, with me not having a war in my hand for that matter, I thought that depending on a war to win was not wise. There is also synergy in the movies. Obviously, there's filming in the game, and there's also Hollywood in the game. And so I thought if I had a hope of especially overtaking Weidenbaum peacefully, the movies would be a necessary part of that plan. Nothing else I could do would be able to compete with Weidenbaum getting gaudy value followed by the space flight. It does, of course, leave me vulnerable. It is, of course, a significant cost. I mean, I do build one this turn. It's a significant cost both in science and in rocks. You could make the case that even with the movie, I don't have high chances of overtaking a Weidenbaum just because Weidenbaum has the Suez Canal that's giving him so much value, has so much more population than I do. And so maybe in this situation, I should have just accepted that Weidenbaum was in a commanding position, at least in a potential peaceful game, and that my only and that I should instead aim to finish second ahead of Gandon. In order to finish ahead of Gandon, which I definitely can do, I need to avoid being hit by a big war from him. And obviously, playing the movies this turn makes it a lot more likely that Gandon can get a big war against me. For example, it means that I won't have enough science to build an air forces next turn, even if one is on the rail. So I think that argument, probably in retrospect, is arguably true, but I also think it's not for certain that I can't overtake Weidenbaum. I do have a bit of a culture lead. I'll have more culture protection than him. Like I said, there is a potential Hollywood Ian Fleming waiting for me. And maybe Weidenbaum also, you know, could potentially get hit by a war from Gandon or something. So maybe first was still a possibility for me in this game, and I do kind of feel, even in retrospect, that if I'm going to get to first, it has to be through movies. But I can also see the argument that more realistically, maybe first is out of reach for me, but second isn't. And if I want to get second, I need to be focusing on military over this, and I should have maybe built a temple and done some other stuff instead. Anyway, I ended up taking reserves with my last civil action. Definitely a big good cut for me. I draw impacts of agricultural population. Occupy the agriculture, at least, should be a suitable impact for me. Population, probably not. Weidenbaum Seeds reveals an immigration that I seeded. At least it doesn't hit me. It hits Gandon, which is nice. Weidenbaum builds 2 more cannons to become strongest again. Takes and develops the civil service to have a ton of civil actions. Increases population, takes an urban growth to help with that last lab upgrade, as well as reserves and efficient upgrades. So a lot of yellow cards, lots of civil actions. Yeah, Weidenbaum definitely making use of these civil actions that he has from the Republic. civil service. Ganon gets 4 yellow tokens from Fandrick, and then he does, sadly for Fandrick, have a War of Culture in his hand. And not only that, but thanks to the Cavalryman and the military theory and the patriotism, he is able to get 2 modern army tactics to push him up to 71 strength. So that's definitely, obviously, a very, very big war. Strong turn from Ganon. Not the biggest war I've ever seen, but I mean, comparatively, because of Fandrick's low strength position. And Fandrick chooses to resign. This did cause some discussion in the game thread where Ganon made the case that Fandrick was not in a completely hopeless position at this point in the game, even after the big war, because, I mean, there's still probably going to be maybe 3 more turns or so in Age 3, and, you know, maybe I could get hit by a big war with Ganon, or Fandrick will find some way to recover or something. Like, a lot of stuff can happen in Age 3. And so Ganon was probably right, I think, in what I was arguing, that there was a small chance that Fandrick could at least maybe finish 3rd and not 4th. In my opinion, however, I think this is a very defensible resignation from Fandrick. I think if we take a look at his position, well, like I said, Fandrick was not able to actually finish the Manhattan Project. So the best he could do to defend himself would be to, looks like, build another Cavalryman and another Swordsman, which is not even enough to get 2 full tactics. So that would only give Fandrick plus 5 strength. Maybe you could also, yeah, I guess the best would be play him on infantry and upgrade it twice. That could be plus 6. That would put him at 29. He would still lose, let's see, 41, 42. He would lose 47 culture, so Fandrick would be at less than 40. Ganon would be at over 90. So Fandrick at that point would have the lowest culture by a fair amount. Would have more culture production at least, but his economy would also continue to be in shambles as it is right now after the wars he was already hit with. And so Fandrick would not only have less culture than everyone else, he would also have such a weak economy, such an issue with the yellow banks. He would have to, I'm not sure if, you know, he probably, and if he doesn't want to destroy things up with a rebellion, then he couldn't even maybe defend himself and would have to, like, build an organized religion or something, then it would lose even more culture. While it might not technically be a completely hopeless position for Fandrick, I think it's pretty close to it. And then Fandrick himself made the case, I think on Discord, that from a long-term perspective, it's more beneficial to him to sort of establish a pattern that Fandrick is willing to resign if he's hit by a huge war that would almost certainly cause him to lose the game. And that's a good notice to have for your opponents, because it discourages your opponents from getting a really big game-winning war against you, at least in a 3 or 4 player game. It discourages your opponents from going all in on a big war against you if they know that you'll probably resign and they'll only get 7 culture out of it. I haven't been playing Through the Ages for that long, but I have been playing long enough to know that the topic of resignations is a very hot-button issue in the community, with a lot of strong feelings. I confess I also have very strong feelings about it. In my opinion, resignation is a necessary part for any game to have. I think it is... I guess it's too strong to say that, like, it's a human right, but I do think that, like, from a game design perspective, it is an absolute, inarguable necessity to allow players to resign essentially whenever they want, and to not force them to keep playing a game that, for whatever reason, they don't want to keep playing. Technically, Through the Ages doesn't even have that, because you're not allowed to resign on your last turn. You have to play it out. But since it's the last turn, I get that argument where, you know, just do whatever on your last turn, and then it'll be fine. But I think before the last turn, like I said, I think it is a necessity from a game design perspective to allow players to resign and not play a game that they don't want to play. And so I think it is inarguable that Through the Ages needs a way for people to resign. So then you can argue, well, what type of resignation is preferred? And I think there's a case to be made that the current way it works could be improved upon. Maybe increasing the culture, say, from 7 to 10 could make sense. I think one suggestion I heard from someone, which is an interesting suggestion to me, is make it so that if someone resigns while a war is being declared against them, then have the war count as winning by 7 strength. And so if it's a war in territory, instead of getting 7 culture if someone resigns, you would get 2 yellow tokens. If it's a war of technology, you would get 7 science. And if it's a hybrid war or war in culture, you would get 7 or 12 culture, respectively. I think that suggestion makes sense. I think that it's not that I necessarily think the current resignation system is perfect. But I do think you need a resignation system. I think something like having a resignation war count as like it's just however strength the person had when they resigned. I think that is really bad for a number of reasons. I also frankly think that it's a good idea to discourage players from being able to win a game basically just by beating up on a player in a weak position. Like we can see in this game, for example, right? Fiantric was in a really weak position, and so anyone who could get a big war against him would get a lot of culture from it. And I think that in a situation like this, when one player is really weak, if you have a resignation system where basically people can just get like tons of culture by warring on the weak player, then the Through the Ages game turns into a game of who draws the most wars. And that is very boring to me. I think that making sure that everyone knows that any war, no matter how big, could result in only 7 culture if the opponent resigns, discourages games from turning into who draws the most wars so they can beat up on the weakest player, and instead means that you have to have a more balanced civilization and you need to be able to win even if your war only gives you 7 culture. I think that makes the game a lot more interesting. So that's my personal opinion when it comes to the resignation system. Like I said, it's not that I think it's perfect, but that I think that it is good, and I think that, like I said, discouraging big wars, I think, is a feature of the current resignation rule and not a problem with it. Anyway, as for my turn, I don't see, because I'm the weakest. These impacts are also neutral for me at best. Now, Fandrick resigned, but I obviously also really need to respond to gain a strength push. Luckily, there is an Air Forces on the road, so they enable me to do that. So I play the reserves for food, increase my population. So, okay, let me think about this a bit. So, the problem with the line I take here, and we'll see it in action in the next turn, so I won't go into too much detail about it. But basically, in order to defend against a war from Gandon, I need to end this turn with a free population. So the patriotism is necessary for me to have enough military actions to defend myself. The Air Forces is necessary. So these 3 civil actions are necessary. So it's only these 2 that I can change. So it looks like basically what I could have done instead was not play the reserves and destroy 2 buildings. So, for example, I could destroy, let's see, if I destroy a lab, I would have 12 science next turn. So I could destroy a lab. I think I can't destroy a mine. So I would have to destroy a lab and a farm. And then I could put both of those populations into my military. So if I did that, then next turn I would be able to defend myself. I would have to destroy, but because I destroyed the farm, I couldn't increase my population. Was there another way? Let's see. With the patriotism, I'll have 5, so 13, 18, 21. Yeah, so I'll have 13 plus 5 from patriotism is 18, plus 3 from Maria is 21. 2 Air Forces is 14, so that leaves me with 7. Which leaves me 1 more. Yeah, so I can't destroy a mine, so I would have to destroy a lab and a farm. Which means that next turn, I would be able to defend by playing Air Forces. And then destroying 3... Wait. Yeah, play air forces, play patriotism, and destroy 3 buildings. So basically, what I could have done instead, if I wanted to be sure of defending myself, is destroy a lab and a farm, and put them into military. And then next turn I would be able to play air forces, play patriotism, and destroy, 3 more buildings. Probably the second lab. I think I would have to keep the farm to avoid famine. So probably the second lab and 2 mines, and then put those into military. So if I wanted to be sure to defend against Gandon, I could have done that play. But destroying a lab and a farm this turn would obviously be really, really bad. It would wreck my economy a lot. And you could make the case that maybe by doing that, I would just enable Gandon to win peacefully. I mean, I do have the culture advantage over Gandon. So... But on the other hand, I think even with a war, I think I would have a chance to beat Gandon after being hit by a war. So even though I could defend against a war by destroying a lab and a farm, it's not clear to me, especially since maybe Gandon doesn't have a second war in hand. I mean, there's a good chance that he does, but it's possible that he doesn't. If he doesn't, I would be wrecking my economy for no reason. So it's at least... Well, destroying the lab and the farm to ensure I can defend against a war would definitely be the safest play. And I confess I didn't consider this play at the game, so this is all at the time, so this is all in hindsight. Even in hindsight, I'm not sure if it would be the correct play to make. I think that the real problem with my position is just my lack of civil actions. Like I said, not taking that justice system earlier. That was my biggest mistake in the game. And now we're just talking about the least bad way to compensate for that mistake. Anyway, I keep the 2 impacts that are going to be neutral for me. I draw a good pact at least, and an armed intervention. Venomom takes the 3rd copy of Air Forces, or is this... it's the 2nd copy, right? The 2nd copy of Air Forces. There's 1 left. This Fantork assigned. Plays reserves for food, which enables him to build a second Air Force, I think. Yeah, so that Gandon goes up to 61 strength. Probably defending from himself from an aggression from Gandon, at least if he has a bonus card in hand. And also takes some yellow cards. Is able to upgrade a lab, finally, and increases his population. And Gandon does indeed have another war that he declares against me. At least he's not able to push his strength too much more, especially since he has to replace Napoleon now because the age is going to end. So he's only going to be at 70 strength. And unfortunately, well, so I offered the international tourism. Basically, I did out my turn, and after the war, I'm going to have about equal culture with Gandon. We're both going to have about 70, I think like high 60s, or yeah, high 60s, low 70s. So basically, going to have Watai. Vinemum's going to have a bit more after his turn of culture production. But I thought that because Vinemum has spaceflight, I thought that I had no chance of finishing first over Vinemum at this point. But I thought that I did have a chance of finishing second. And that's why I offered the pact to Vinemum, because I could have offered it to Gandon, but I thought that I was currently competing against Gandon for second. And that was why giving Vinemum extra culture to guarantee him being first wasn't as big a deal to me, because I was confident he would finish ahead of me regardless. Anyway, the best I can do is this, where I, as we can see, I am unfortunately 1 civil action short. If I had 1 additional civil action, and like I said, the previous turn, if I had destroyed 2 buildings instead of playing reserves and increasing my population, then I would have had just enough. Yeah, I would have had just enough rocks to build a knight and a swordsman, which would have put me at 64-71, and I would have actually won the war against Gandon by a little bit, and perhaps that meant that Gandon wouldn't have declared the war against me. So, yeah, my lack of civil actions, not having taken the justice system, being only on 5 civil actions, making me 1 civil action short of doing that, now it would have put me in rebellion, but probably that would have been worth it to win the war, or again, probably again wouldn't have declared the war if I would have been able to defend.
So not taking that Justice System and being on 5 civil actions for the entire game ends up very directly hurting me a lot on this turn. I draw the second Modern Army tactic and an Impact of Technology, which I definitely can't play. Vitamin Bomb Seeds reveals the refugees, and unfortunately this hits me. Takes Engineering, revolutionary idea, builds an opera with Gotti, plays a team sports, but doesn't build on it, takes military build-up, and increases population 3 times. So, Vitamin Bomb is clearly still a bit, you know... Oh, I should also note that I was kind of expecting Vitamin Bomb to probably end the game, but he chose not to. I guess figuring that more turns in the game would help him, because he has more science production than Gandin, and it gives him more turns to play more text and stuff, so that doesn't make sense. And Vitamin Bomb felt safe with all of these yellow cards from a war against Gandin, that he was comfortable prolonging the game. Gandin ends up taking 15 culture from me. As you can see, we're now about tied in culture. But he seeds and reveals a civil unrest, which unfortunately hits me, so as a result of that, I am now 2 points behind Gandin. Gandin plays reserves for rocks. He's able to build 1 multimedia. Takes the democracy. They'll be able to play next turn, especially with the revolutionary idea. And at Pro Sports, just a cheap tech, probably with Einstein, maybe also for Impact of Happiness or competition. Age 4 begins. I seed. I think that's Impact of Agriculture. I thought that I should be able to rebuild my farm before the end of the game, so it'll be a neutral impact. Revealing a territory that I was not willing to put anything on. I mean, you know, it's no longer age 3, so you're not getting any draws. You're just getting the strength from it. So I was willing to bid, I think, basically 1 unit, because if I bid any more, then I wouldn't be able to even threaten being able to defend an aggression from Gandin. The best I can really do this turn is to play Fleming, play a satellite, so this puts me 9 behind. Yeah, I guess I'm kind of still not threatening to defend an aggression from Gandin. So maybe I could have bid more into it, but it's also the kind of the only reason to win the colony is specifically if Impact of Colonies is in the deck. Anyway, Gandin had 4 colonization bonus, so there's probably no way I was winning the colony regardless. Yeah, the refugees cost me an idle worker, which meant that I had to destroy a farm. I destroyed the farm instead of the mine, so that I would have enough rocks next turn to build a second movie. Maybe I should have built the movie this turn instead of playing satellites. I guess I could have destroyed the mine, but I wanted to keep it for impacts. Well, I needed to keep it for the impact of balance that I had seeded, right? Which the impact of balance is currently looking not very good for me. I think the impact of agriculture I seeded was a mistake in retrospect. I think I didn't really consider that I would have to destroy this farm and be below consumption. So I think I shouldn't have seeded that impact. Vitamin Bomb Seeds reveals a developed territory. Gandin is also able to win this. I bid a little more for it, but not enough. Vitamin Bomb takes Churchill. We'll be able to get 6 culture from him. Takes multimedia, plays a revolutionary idea to play the oil and upgrade 1. Looks like he's planning for, well, thanks to the railroad, this costs 6 rocks, but I'll get an extra 6 from it. So it's like or an extra, yeah, so this is going from +4, yeah. So it's basically a free upgrade, and it helps with impacts, specifically impact of industry. Maybe I tell that he has impact of industry in his hand, though, even though it is a free upgrade. Gandin Seeds reveals an impact of variety. This ends up at least only giving Gandin +2 against me. Plays democracy, plays a pro sports, builds a temple, though, for the culture. Looks like I tell there's no impact of happiness on the deck, at least not seeded by Gandin. As for me, I see the impact of, I think that's wonders. It's a neutral impact. I reveal impact of architecture. This is about it's the same amount of culture for me and Gandon. And so I ended up realizing again that I destroyed this farm last turn, but I need to rebuild it. So yeah, not great for me. I realized that I need to get ahead of consumption for that impact of agriculture I seeded. So definitely didn't play these last 2 turns as well as I could have. I think I was a little on tilt from the war, perhaps. Yeah. I don't think it made a major difference, though. So I looked at Weidenbaum's hand and saw that there was indeed an impact of industry in it. So I ended up, figuring things out and doing things this way ended up being, giving me the most culture for the impacts that were in the deck. It gives me, because of this gives me +1 for industry, this gives me for agriculture. Weidenbaum Seeds reveals that impact of balance that I had seeded, so unfortunately this ends up giving Ganon +4 culture against me. Plays a revolutionary idea, plays the engineering, develops a multimedia, builds a second opera, another mine, plays the reserves, disbands the cannons for another mine, and finishes the spaceflight for 29 culture. So before the final impacts, we can see that Weidenbaum is, let's see, that's 16 culture ahead of me, and it's definitely much better set up for impacts, especially that impact of industry that I know he seeded. So, that means that Weidenbaum is almost certainly going to win this game, as I predicted, but I am at least 4 culture of Gandon, so maybe with the right set of impacts in the deck, I could finish second at least. But the first impact is an impact of colonies that was revealed. We can see why Gandon wanted to win those last 2 colonies. This gives him +12 culture against me and makes it much less likely I'll be able to finish second. Next is the impact of wonders that I seeded. This gives me Gandon +1 against me. Next is the impact of agriculture that I seeded. This ends up being a neutral impact for me and Gandon. But then the impact of science basically decides the game, gives Gandon +4 culture against me and makes it essentially impossible for me to catch up. Next is the impact of harmony. That gives Gandon an additional +4 culture against me. And finally is that impact of industry, which gives Gandon +1 culture against me. At the end, Weidenbaum ends up winning the game with a margin of 39, and Gandon ends up second ahead of me by a margin of 28. So this was, I think I mentioned this earlier, this is basically the first game I played against, well, it's not the first game I played against, really elite competition, but it's the first game outside of, the first game with 12-hour turn time that I played against elite competition. Like, best of the best, which Weidenbaum is, and Gandon and Fantrick are also really good players, obviously. And so, looking back on it, I feel that I played most of Ages 1 and 2 pretty well. You can quibble probably with some of my turns, but I think overall I played them pretty well. But I think that looking back on it, and what this game really shows is how at the highest level through the ages, making a mistake on one turn can cost you the game. Where I think not taking that justice system is what cost me this game. And we saw that, or direct. I mean, maybe I probably wouldn't have been able to get first even with it. I think Weidenbaum's big Suez Canal probably would have been too hard to compete with no matter what I did. But that happens sometimes. But I think that if I had taken that justice system, there was a very good chance I could have at least finished second ahead of Gandon. And so that one mistake on that turn, we saw had an impact several turns later when Gandon declared that war against me. Maybe also if I had, destroyed my economy to set myself up for defense against Gandon, I could have potentially finished ahead of Gandon. I did have a big culture lead against Gandon at that point. And so maybe if I had focused completely on being able to defend against Gandon, even if I had to preemptively destroy my economy to do that, perhaps I still could have ended up winning against him. Although Gandon ended up getting a 30 culture swing against me. So that is slightly more than his margin against me. But if I had preemptively destroyed my economy, then instead of declaring the war, for example, Ganon could have done other things and potentially could have just won peacefully instead. Probably, I think he would have, actually. I mean, you can't say for sure, but it feels that way to me. So I think, you know, while maybe I should have just focused on defense because that was, like, my only chance of finishing second, as if Ganon couldn't war against me, I think not taking the Justice System was the ultimate reason why I finished third. Anyway, though, at least that's just game one. Finishing third is, you know, not... It's bad, but not the worst it could possibly be. There's a lot more left to play in this group. I think the next video I have will be a 3-player game between me, Ganon, and Fantric. So I'm going to look to upload that video pretty soon in 2 or 3 days. So look forward to that. As always, please leave a comment if you have any comments or criticisms of either my play or my video making. I'm always looking to improve on both. I think just going over this game, like I said, showed me some areas I can improve already. So I'm happy to see that, but I'd love to hear from you if you have any other notes on better lines I could have taken. But until my next video, I hope you enjoyed this one, and I hope to see you next time.